Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start with a statement, and then we'll take your questions. Our normal policy, consistent with the policies of past administrations, is to not comment on background checks and security clearances. Given the unusual nature of these circumstances and a number of false reports floating around, we wanted to try to explain as best we can within our security limitations how the background investigation process works, and then talk a little bit about Rob Porter and how his situation fits within that process. Background investigation process is the process for evaluating allegations about a White House staffer's conduct prior to joining the White House. It's run by the federal law enforcement and intelligence communities. It's used throughout the U.S. government. It's thorough, it's complex, and it takes time. It takes time because we want to get it right. It's also costly, but it's absolutely worth it. Over the course of any investigation, some information may arise that seems troubling or complicated and requires additional investigating. It's important to allow that process to continue in order for a fulsome understanding of the information. The whole U.S. government takes this process seriously. It's not politicized or interfered with, but we do push to obtain accurate, fulsome information as quickly as possible. Now let me talk about Rob Porter. The allegations made against Rob Porter, as we understand them, involve incidents long before he joined the White House. Therefore, they are best evaluated through the background check process. It's important to remember that Rob Porter has repeatedly denied these allegations and done so publicly. That doesn't change how serious and disturbing these allegations are. They're upsetting. And the background check investigates both the allegations and the denials. The investigation does not stop when allegations come to light. It continues to determine the truth. We should not short-circuit an investigation just because allegations are made unless they could compromise national security or interfere with operations at the White House. The truth must be determined. And that was what was going on with Rob Porter. His background investigation was ongoing. He was operating on an interim security clearance. His clearance was never denied, and he resigned. To summarize, the allegations against Rob Porter are serious and deeply troubling. He did deny them. The incidents took place long before he joined the White House. Therefore, they were investigated as part of the background check, as this process is meant for such allegations. It was not completed, and Rob Porter has since resigned. During his time at the White House, Rob received no waivers and no special treatment, and this is the tried and true process. It was followed meticulously. We hope this helps explain how seriously these matters are taken and how the process works to investigate such allegations. With that, I'll take your questions. John.
Can you tell us, Raj, when the White House first became aware of these allegations?
Well, I know there's been some reports about the Chief of Staff. He became fully aware about these allegations yesterday. I'm not going to get into the specifics regarding who may have known what pieces of information, because they were all part of an ongoing background check investigation.
You say fully aware. Was he partially aware?
Well, I think we all became aware of the news reports that emerged on Wednesday morning and some of the graphic images.
But did he know any of this back in November?
Again, I'm not going to get into the specifics. Peter?
Let me ask you if I can. The statement changed from John Kelly yesterday morning to the statement yesterday evening. He said based on new allegations. But what changed yesterday, absent a photograph, in terms of new allegations?
Well, I think what I just referenced, the reports had additional allegations. They had more information.
So you're saying the initial reports were two former wives accused him of violence, both physical and verbal abuse, was not sufficient for him to say that I think he's a man of honor?
There were a number of statements from, from the press secretary, from the Chief of Staff, from others that reflected the Rob Porter that, we've come to know working here for over a year, and the Chief of Staff for about the last 6 months. But the reports are troubling, and I think the statement from Wednesday night reflects the Rob Porter that we had seen in these news reports and some of these credible allegations.
So to be clear, what was so shocking that had changed? He said it was shocking. What was he
Yeah, I
referring
think
to?
the full nature of the allegations, particularly the images.
You said, then just to answer one more thing, you talked about the fact that there weren't any concerns, you said, that could compromise national security or interfere with operations here at the White House. But we've spoken to one of Porter's ex-wives who told us that she warned the FBI that he could be susceptible to blackmail because of the allegations against him.
Well, again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the investigation itself. I think that's a question for the FBI and others. But this is not our process. This is the process the U.S. government uses across agencies and has existed over numerous administrations.
The president, just
Hang on a second. Cecilia.
Raj, I just want to clarify what you're saying here.
Sure.
Are you saying that the chief of staff of this White House had no idea that Rob Porter's two ex-wives had domestic violence allegations against him when they made those claims to the FBI, that John Kelly did not know that? How is that possible the chief of staff did not know that?
Well, again, this is part of an ongoing investigation. We trust the background check process, and the chief of staff does not get detailed updates about what may or may not have been alleged. This is a process. It involves a thorough investigation, and as I went through the process, it involves looking at not just accusations, but denials.
Okay, one more question. The White House had said yesterday that Porter's decision to leave was a personal one, that he wasn't pressured to do so. So would Rob Porter still be on the job today had he not decided to resign?
Well, Rob Porter was terminated yesterday, and his last day, his last day was yesterday. I know he came in earlier today to clear out his stuff.
But would he still be on the job? I mean, Sarah Sanders made it
Well,
very clear.
he offered his
wasn't pressured to
resignation,
do so.
and it was accepted. Jim.
Yes, so in terms of the Chief of Staff's handling of all this, no regrets?
Well, I think the second statement that he sent out reflected his thoughts, which is that these allegations are deeply troubling. They are shocking. And I think the first statement reflected, the Rob Porter that we have known.
But let me ask you if I could follow up on that. Because as you were coming out here yesterday, or Sarah Sanders was coming out here yesterday, you were releasing a statement from Rob Porter saying that he took those photographs. That appears to be an acknowledgement that this abuse took place, that he helped document it. How can the White House Chief of Staff, how can the press secretary, how can this White House still be standing behind him when Mr. Porter appeared to be acknowledging that he had
I think it's fair to say that we all could have done better over the last few hours or last few days in dealing with this situation. But this was a Rob Porter that I and many others have dealt with, that Sarah had dealt with, that other officials, including the Chief of Staff, had dealt with. And the emerging reports were not reflective of the individual who we had come to know.
And I'm just asking one other follow-up.
Jeff, we've got a few.
Raj, did the president know that Rob was working on a temporary clearance?
No, the president saw the news report on Tuesday night and was informed of the resignation on Wednesday. He was saddened by it. Saddened for all the individuals involved.
Over the last year, is that ever something that he was concerned about?
He was not informed about the specifics regarding Rob Porter's security clearance.
Okay.
Sorry, Danielle.
Do you have any information on how many senior White House staffers are currently working under an interim security clearance?
I got into the security clearance process as much as I'm allowed to discuss it, and I'm not going to go further. Yes.
What is the White House's reaction to comments made by former White House aide Omarosa on Celebrity Big Brother, where she said, quote, she is haunted by the president's tweets. She described the situation inside the White House as bad and said it is not going to be okay.
Not very seriously. Omarosa was fired 3 times on The Apprentice, and this was the 4th time we let her go. She had limited contact with the president while here. She has no contact now. Peter.
Raj, we initially were told that Rob Porter was going to stay on a while and oversee a transition period. Now you're telling us he was terminated yesterday. What changed?
I think that we've looked at the things that are necessary to ensure a smooth transition. There will be a new acting staff secretary that we can name later on, and operations can continue smoothly. Lalit.
Thank you. Congratulations for your debut here today. Over the last 1 week, there have been actually 3 different rallies by skilled Indian Americans who are seeking a lift of the per country limit on green card. Everyone has been talking about illegal immigrants. These Indian Americans have been talking about legal immigrants. What's the administration thought on this?
Well, I think the president wants to see legal immigration reform, wants to see us move from a process that currently exists in law of extended family chain migration toward merit-based immigration reforms. We want to ensure that people coming into the country are the best and the brightest, regardless of nationality, creed, religion, or anything else in between. We want to look at educational backgrounds, ability to contribute to the workforce in a way that helps American workers. So the president wants to see reforms that improve America's economy. Noah.
Normally when you hire people, do you wait for the investigation to come back before hiring them? Is the burden of proof not on the people seeking the job to prove that they're qualified and don't have any skeletons in their closet? Or do they just get to come aboard and you wait and see if these what happens with
the process tends to be a little bit different with the White House because there's a lot of officials coming in with the new administration and a lot of individuals coming in having interim clearance.
And then also, what about women who don't have photographs? Do you trust their stories? Because a lot of times, you haven't been at the podium, but Sarah said that allegations weren't credible from other people. Do you need a photograph? And how should women feel if they don't have a photograph?
I don't think any standard applies. I just think that we do take allegations of misconduct, of domestic violence, other issues like that very seriously. We are very concerned about them. In this instance, in the case of Rob Porter, we relied on the background check investigative process. That process hadn't been completed, so we were relying on the information that we had. Anita.
Two questions on two different things. I just want to understand, you use the term fully aware. I don't understand what that means. What does that mean John Kelly knew or didn't know? What is
well, I do know, for instance, that he had not seen images prior to the statement on Tuesday night.
Did he know of the allegations?
Sorry, say that again?
Did he know of some of the allegations?
Again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of what may have emerged from the investigation.
The word fully aware, so I'm just trying to understand.
I understand. I'm saying specifically on images. I don't have every single detail, and I'm not going to get into every single specific. We relied on a process. This is a process used throughout the U.S. government. It's a process used by every agency for an individual seeking a security clearance. Rob Porter was never denied a security clearance. He was never given any special treatment. The process was still ongoing. We relied upon it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a second topic, which was on Capitol Hill, members and their staffs are saying that because the court case regarding DACA is now, meaning that the administration is now accepting DACA applications again, that they feel that there's breathing room and that March 5th is no longer the deadline.
March 5th is the deadline.
And what's going to happen if they haven't done anything by then, because it doesn't look like
we say they haven't done anything. What do you mean?
If Congress hasn't acted by March 5th, what is going to happen?
Well, we fully expect Congress to take action on the president's immigration reform framework.
Raj.
April.
Okay, Raj, two questions. I want to follow up on Noah. You say the president takes the issue of violence against women seriously.
Yes.
Why did this administration close the Violence Against Women office when he became president last year? He defunded it and everything, and also he shut down the Women and Girls office as well. And I have another question on.
I don't know specifically why those specific offices may have been closed, but look, I did talk to the president earlier today. He told me he was very saddened by these reports and by the information that he saw, by the images that he saw. We do take violence against women and these types of allegations very seriously. What's your second question?
The interim security clearance, does that allow Rob Porter to be able to touch, at the time when he was employed here, to be able to touch and see classified materials?
Yeah, it would, yes.
Raj,
Blake.
Thanks, Raj. Let me turn your attention back to the Hill, where there's this spending deal going on. Republicans for years have said there needs to be fiscal restraint, years and years and years. Now, we know that the deficit for the fiscal year, this fiscal year, is potentially going to reach $1 trillion. You've got the House Freedom Caucus saying about this deal, growing the size of government by 13% adds to the swamp instead of draining it. This is not what the American people sent us to do. Essentially, they're saying some within their party are being hypocritical. Is the president concerned about all of this spending? And what exactly is your plan to pay for it?
He is concerned about spending in Washington. He's expressed that for years. Let me just say off the bat, we do support the 2-year spending bill that is being discussed and voted on in the House and Senate. It lifts the caps on defense spending, which is something that the Secretary of Defense, the President's generals have told him that they need to ensure that we rebuild our military, and protect our national security. With respect to deficits, we're going to be releasing a budget on Monday. The budget does move us toward a path of restoring fiscal responsibility. It reduces our deficit by trillions of dollars. I'm not going to get more specific. You guys will get more on Monday. But it does incorporate these budget caps, incorporates the tax bill, incorporates our other priorities. So we do think that that budget will outline a path toward fiscal responsibility.
You're still going to be running deficits at that point, and now you've got this $300 billion cap to raise. So is it just economic growth? Is that the only way that
economic growth is essential to cutting deficits and to restoring fiscal responsibility? Again, the budget will outline a lot more detail.
Raj,
yeah.
What can you tell us about the involvement of the White House Communications Director in crafting the statements that your office issued yesterday?
Well,
among them, you have the defense issued by the Chief of Staff. You have the statement that Sarah read from the podium in which Rob Porter calls the allegations against him vile and outrageous. What can you tell us about the extent to which the Communications Director was involved in crafting those statements?
Well, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but I would say that all the statements were crafted by a number of senior White House officials. Margaret?
One more question,
Yeah.
because you have repeatedly referred to the denials that Rob Porter issued.
Mm-hmm.
How much weight were those denials given within the White House?
I think you've got to take allegations seriously. You've got to take denials seriously. And again, the statements reflected our experience with Rob Porter and other officials' experience with Rob Porter. But again, looking at more of the reporting and looking at more facts emerging, you saw the Chief of Staff statement, and the White House did accept his resignation. Margaret?
Thanks. A couple more questions about this issue. Can you, it sounded like you're saying the investigation is ongoing, is that right?
Well, I don't think, now that he's been terminated, I don't think it continues, but I could get back to you on the specifics.
So I guess what I was going to ask is, once the investigation is totally completed and you're satisfied that you know the answers to those questions, could you elaborate more specifically on the first time anyone mentioned this to the president, when,
I know that any issues regarding his security clearance weren't made available to the president prior to Tuesday.
Hang on. So I'm sorry. Hang on a second, please. I guess does the president retain full confidence in his chief of staff?
Yes.
In his White House counsel, in his communications director?
Yeah, absolutely. The president has confidence in his chief of staff, counsel, and communications.
Can I ask you a finance question real quickly on the spending plan? As I understand it, and notwithstanding whatever the budget is going to say, the U.S. is going to have to borrow more than $1 trillion this year, and it could affect markets globally. Does the president feel confident, would you dispute that? And does the president feel confident that that's still the right thing to do and it can be kind of mitigated in the budget plan?
Well, I'd refer you to Treasury on the specifics. I know that some of those numbers have more to do with the previous administration's accounting than it has to do with this administration's policies. But I would say that we are committed to fiscal discipline, and the budget next week will show that in greater detail. Ann?
Yeah, back to Mr. Porter.
Sure.
If I understood your description of the background check process correctly, the fact that the two ex-wives had made statements to the FBI about alleged abuse during that investigation was not a disqualifying factor in his initial hiring. Does the White House regret that? And going forward, do you plan to change the way you consider allegations of domestic abuse?
Well, again, understand that the background investigation was not completed. There was no determination made about Rob Porter's security clearance. There was not a thumbs up or thumbs down. There was no denial of a security clearance. He was operating off an interim clearance. That is the clearance that many individuals who have never had a security clearance would get when they first come to the White House. With respect to allegations made, again, every allegation has to be investigated. Any denial has to be thoroughly and fully investigated. We allow that process to play out. Francesca.
Thank you, Raj. I wanted to clear up a few things that you said today on this. So first you said that the president wasn't aware of Mr. Porter's security clearance status, but when was the president aware of the allegations of abuse?
On Tuesday night when there was a report issued.
And then secondly, you have said that Rob Porter was terminated twice in this briefing. Is the White House now saying that Mr. Porter was fired?
I just mean the process by which your employment status ends is termination.
And then the last thing on that is, you said that there are things that this White House could have done better with respect to this. Could you please detail that? What could the White House have done better?
Well, I mean, again, I'm not going to get into a TikTok and all these detailed specifics. I think a lot of individuals were involved with the White House response to this, myself included. I think a lot of us could have done better. Trey.
Thanks, Raj. Just clarifying on Francesca's point, and I have 2 questions for you. So Rob Porter was not fired by the Trump administration.
No, he resigned and we accepted his resignation.
Okay. And if I could follow up on, you said the president was saddened. You've spoken with the president about these allegations this morning. Can you give us a better idea about the concerns that the president had? This is a gentleman who was in the Oval Office, very close to the president, numerous times throughout the first year of this administration. What did the president specifically have to say about these allegations?
He was surprised. You know, he, like many of us, did not see that in Rob Porter, did not see what these allegations have brought forward. And so he was surprised by it, he was disheartened by it, and he was saddened by it.
And if I could ask you about the memo from the House Intelligence Committee,
Sure.
Do you have any sort of update on the timeline? Has the president made a decision, and where does the review process stand?
Well, the review process is ongoing, and as we have said previously, we're using the same standards and the same process by which the Republican drafted memo was evaluated that was voted out of the House Intelligence Committee. It's going through both a legal and national security review. The president, you know, I think we previously mentioned the president was briefed by the Deputy Attorney General the other day. When we have more information or announcement, we'll make that available. John.
Thank you, Raj. 2 brief questions.
Sure.
First, can you roughly say, are there a lot of other people at the highest levels in the White House operating under a temporary security pass?
I can't get into that.
The other question, very simply, are there going to be any further resignations by Friday or over the weekend?
I have no personnel announcements. Amen.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. As we stand here, the Dow is off about 1,000 points or more. Can you give me the president's reaction to the stock market volatility that we've seen so far this week? And does the administration still view the stock market as a barometer for its own performance?
Well, the president, like the rest of the White House, is concerned about long-term economic indicators and factors, and the fundamentals in terms of the long term are very strong. Again, unemployment and the labor market are very strong. Unemployment's at 4.1%. We saw wages rise on Friday for the first time, not for the first time, but at a measurable level for the first time in nearly 8 years or 9 years. And corporate earnings are high, and we believe that these long-term fundamentals demonstrate a healthy economy.
Raj.
Yeah.
Thank you, Raj. There have been reports President Trump is asking for preemptive military options for North Korea amid concerns from some Pentagon officials. Yesterday here, Secretary Mattis said North Korea is, quote, firmly in the diplomatic lane with viable military options. That's a quote. Has President Trump asked for preemptive military options, and what is his view of the concerns expressed by Victor Cha and other experts that this would lead to catastrophic casualties in Seoul?
Well, first off, I'm not going to get ahead of anything the president may consider. We don't telegraph, and the president doesn't telegraph his potential actions. But our strategy with respect to North Korea is denuclearization. It's to provide as much economic and political pressure on that regime so that it would end its nuclear program. And we've had a considerable amount of success over the last year pursuing that strategy. We've had dozens of countries reduce economic or diplomatic ties with North Korea. Trade with North Korea with countries in the region has been reduced. We continue to apply as much pressure, maximum pressure, on the regime. And as the Secretary of Defense said, we keep all options on the table, but the path we obviously would prefer is diplomatic. Kelly.
When you
I'll get to you in a second, Kelly. Yeah, go ahead.
Yesterday, U.S. personnel in Syria were attacked, and there were counter-strikes launched by U.S. forces. I wonder if you could give us an idea of the president's involvement in this, and whether you have any indication that there were any Russian personnel involved in the strike against the attacks on U.S. personnel.
Well, the president was involved and briefed. I don't know an answer on Russian engagement, but I get back to you on that. Kelly?
When you consider the Porter matter now, do you think that there were personal feelings, relationships in the White House among the senior staff, collegial and friendship relationships that clouded people's judgment on how this was handled?
I think I'd point you to a number of statements that indicate that White House was prepared to defend Rob Porter based on initial accusations that we heard about and his denial. And that was based on our experiences with Rob Porter. And so, I mean, to answer your question, I think that the initial response was based upon that.
Do Did anyone recuse themselves from participating?
The communications director did recuse herself from some matters concerning it.
Thank you. Raj, I want to take you back, Liz, to the reports of emails, texts, between Lisa Page and the IG Peter Strzok. From the podium, Sarah has said that those texts are evidence of political bias. Now, everyone has opinions. So is the view of the administration that persons who are not fans of the president should not be allowed to investigate him? And also, can you point to any evidence other than the text messages that the investigation was conducted by people who were biased other than these texts? I mean, was there anything in the way the investigation has been conducted?
Yeah, look, you bring up an issue that the president and others have talked about within the administration about political bias at the FBI and Department of Justice. And this predates this investigation. There are a number of issues regarding how the Hillary Clinton email investigation was handled by the former FBI director and others in the FBI that have raised questions. When it comes to the text messages that you reference, that's not the considered judgment of the president or others, but it is the judgment of the special counsel who had him removed from the case because specifically citing political bias. So there are a number of issues. There's a Department of Justice Inspector General report that we've heard about that is going to look into this issue further.
Raj,
I think last question. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Raj. Two questions. First, on President Trump and Dr. Kissinger's meeting, President Trump tweeted that they will discuss China and also other areas. Can you tell us more about their meeting?
I think we'll have more information for you later on. It's the last question, Sagar.
Raj, is Vice President Pence or Ivanka Trump willing to meet with Kim Jong-un's sister while they're at the Olympics?
There's no meetings planned whatsoever. All right.
Are you investigating reports of chemical weapons used by Bashar al-Assad in Syria?
I'll have to get back to you on that. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Here on Right Side Broadcasting. I am Steve Lookner. Thanks for sticking around with us for the White House press briefing. Originally it was supposed to start at 1 p.m., then was delayed till 2:30, then was delayed till 3:15. Finally, it started around, I think, 3:40, but we did get the press briefing. We want to talk about it with you. Most of the questions were on the whole Rob Porter thing, which we'll talk about with you. We'd love, but here on the post show, our top priority is to hear from you. So what did you think about the White House press briefing? If you have comments, give me a shout on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner. Let me know what you thought about the briefing. We're going to read your comments on the air here at Right Side Broadcasting. Big thanks to our moderators in the chat room. We got Real Frank and Barbara Braley there and JC right now. And on the website, we got Common Sense and Glen O. Guinevere is also in the chat room. So thanks to our moderators. And we are viewer supported. So if you like having an alternative to the mainstream media for your news coverage, please consider donating. You can donate by going to the bottom of the YouTube chat, click on the $ at the bottom of the YouTube chat, or go to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate. So before we get to your comments, real quick, just want to give a very brief summary of this whole Rob Porter situation. And what's going on with that, and talk about what Raj Shah said about it today in the press briefing. So Rob Porter was the staff secretary at the White House. It's a big responsibility of that position is to control the flow of information to the president. So he works closely with President Trump and other people in the White House. And Rob Porter has been accused by two of his ex-wives of being in abusive relationships with them, where it involves physical abuse and verbal abuse and psychological abuse. So there are those accusations from two of his ex-wives. And then I think it was yesterday, and not 2 days ago, but sometime in the last couple of days, there were photos released, at least one photo released, of one of his ex-wives with a black eye that was allegedly sustained when he hit her. And so this kind of blew up when that photo came out. And At the time, once that photo came out, and then news about that these allegations had come from his ex-wives became public. At that point, the White House yesterday was saying, well, Rob Porter is resigning. He's going to stay on for a while, but he's resigning, so he'll be leaving eventually. And that quickly kind of came into what happened, which was, as of today, he's no longer in the White House. He's already left. So Rob Porter has left the White House. He is no longer working there. And a big issue being talked about in the media today is, when did people in the White House know about these allegations about Rob Porter? So this photo was just made public like a day or two ago. And as far as I'm aware, the allegations just really hit the papers like in the last couple days. But there were reports out there that the FBI, when doing a background check on Rob Porter, had interviewed his ex-wives, had heard these allegations, had passed these allegations on to the White House. I'd seen reports that said John Kelly might have known about it before, a couple days ago. But so there's these questions about who knew about this in the White House, when did they know about it, did they know about this a while before the last couple of days? Raj Shah today was asked about this. He really wouldn't comment at all on what Chief of Staff Kelly knew about Rob Porter before a couple days ago. Also, just so you know, Rob Porter did work very closely with Chief of Staff Kelly, and Chief of Staff Kelly was a big fan of Rob Porter. So there's this question out there is like, did they know about these allegations, a few months ago and then hire him anyway? And is that proper? Not there's those kind of questions. And then there's questions involving John Kelly, because initially he came out with a statement very supportive of Rob Porter, and then he came out with another statement that was acknowledging the seriousness of the allegations. So there's those kind of issues, that's the basic summary of the story. I just wanted to give that in case you weren't familiar with the Rob Porter story. And you were hearing a lot of questions about that today. What did the president know? All of this stuff. So we can talk about that if you'd like. Give me a shout on Twitter, @Lookner on Twitter, @Lookner on Twitter. Let me know what you thought about the press briefing. And thank you, Heather Steele made a donation. Heather Steele, thank you very much. And Heather Steele said, great work, Right Side Broadcasting. We appreciate the donation, Heather Steele. That's what keeps us on the air, so thank you. And, one thing also that struck me during the briefing that Raj Shah was saying is, what he was saying is, and I have read this in reports the last couple of days. He was saying we in the White House had such a great experience with Rob Porter and knew him one way, and when we heard these accusations, it was very surprising to us because that's not the Rob Porter that we knew. I'm paraphrasing Raj Shah, but he has said this, and I've heard this from other people in the White House saying that their experience with Rob Porter was incredibly positive. And so Raj Shah today was saying we were surprised about these allegations when we first heard them. He did say, in retrospect, maybe we could have handled this a little bit better. He said we could have done better in the past few days. We all could have done better the past few days in dealing with this situation. And he said we knew him very differently. So it sounded like Raj Shah was saying something like maybe initially we were a little too defensive of him given the circumstances. I don't know. You interpret it how you will, but that's what he said. So anyhow, that was most of the press briefing was about the Rob Porter stuff. But we want to hear from you. Write to me on Twitter, @Lookner, @LOOKNER. Let me know what you thought about the briefing. Okay, Lady of the Kingdom writes in, hey, Steve, they hit the Porter clearance with so many questions to distract from Swan Brothers security clearance and Clinton security clearance going on unchecked, long past termination, and don't buy or sell in the Dow, just angry bankers. It is a good financial base. Now, one thing Lady of the Kingdom was referring to in her email, which I want to point out here, is that the Dow Jones Industrials was down 1,000 points today, 1,034, 4%. From what I've heard, that I've heard some experts say that a big reason for this is that this latest budget deal, which is looking like it's going to be released. By the way, there's a government shutdown at midnight tonight if they don't pass a budget deal. Just remember that. But the budget deal the Senate agreed on, which the House is going to vote on supposedly tonight, increases spending. It increases military spending. It increases domestic spending, and supposedly some investors are concerned because the economy is doing very well, and with this extra spending, there's a lot of investors who are worried about inflation, and inflation not good for the economy. Inflation would also result in interest rates going up, which would push stocks down. So this concern, this point drop today, very well might be related to the concerns that the budget deal that's coming up, which both sides in the Senate have agreed to, is not really addressing spending issues, and also is not going to tamp down the economy, which some investors think the economy needs to be tamped down a bit. And if anything, it's going to stimulate the economy at a time when it doesn't really need stimulation, and it's going to push up inflation, which will lead to higher interest rates, and which will end up hurting the stock market. So that's some of the thinking which could be going on among investors today. But anyways, if you have different thoughts on this, write to me on Twitter, @Lookner, @LOOKNER. Let me know what you think about all this news today and about the press briefing. Nico Filippone says, are you covering the opening ceremony of the Olympics? Well, we can't show that because, that belongs to NBC and they pay a lot of money for it. So, yeah, we're not really allowed to show, Olympic stuff. Although if there's, news that happens there, we'll cover the Olympics. Lynn DeFrank says, sick of the repeated same questions. How many times does one have to say background check was still ongoing? So you think, Lynn, that there were too many similar questions in the briefing. Speaking of the background check that you brought up, there was a point that was a bit confusing to me. I was finding it a bit hard to follow, where Raj Shah several times said we were waiting for the background check. And I guess... So I guess where I'm a little confused is if they knew about the allegations about Rob Porter. I think my point is I think what people in the media, a lot of them were asking about is when did you know about the allegations, and if you did know about them early, was it still cool to have hired him at that point? And to me, waiting on a background check isn't going to tell you whether to hire somebody or not. It's just going to tell you information about the check. And so now maybe about the person you're going to hire. Now maybe what Raj Shah meant is, well, we weren't sure about these allegations as to how whether they were veridical or not, whether they were accurate, whether they were true allegations, and we were going to let the background check play out to hopefully get a better idea of whether these accusations were true. But I guess someone might say in response, well, if you have somebody who's alleged to have done this in relationships with two of his ex-wives, might you want to hold off on hiring that person until you figure out if the allegations are true? Because if it turns out they're true and you've hired them, it's going to be really bad press for the White House, which, whatever you think of the story, I certainly don't think this is good press for the White House. So, and that wasn't really addressed. The background check might give you a better idea of whether the allegations are true, but it doesn't. Saying we were waiting for the background check doesn't address the people's concerns about A, should you hire somebody with these allegations, but B, even if you're somebody who thinks, well, I don't think unproven allegations alone should keep me from hiring somebody, you might say, even in that case, maybe if you're the White House, you want to be really careful about hiring people because you don't want to hire somebody where you don't know if the allegations are true, because if they turn out to be true, then that could be bad PR for the White House. So those kind of questions really weren't answered in the briefing. Anyways, just a thought I had. I'd be interested in hearing his response to those questions. I'd like to hear what his response is. Anyways, so give me a shout with more of your thoughts @Lookner on Twitter. We are taking your comments on the air. Kenneth Foof writes in, Steve, Porter's prior restraining order should be part of an employment background check, another failure of background check system, or... So I think there was a tweet about this that I saw before I want to show you. Hang on one second. I know she posted it. Unless she took it down. Jennifer Jacobs of Bloomberg posted it. Yeah, so Jennifer Jacobs of Bloomberg posted this. It says, doesn't look like Porter had to reveal the 2010 protective order. That was a protective order, I believe, ordering him to stay away from one of his ex-wives. He didn't have to reveal this on his SF-86. The form requires that staff state only orders currently being enforced. So it looks like, I don't know all the details here, but it looks like Jennifer Jacobs is saying that on some kind of form that Porter had to fill out to work at the White House, he didn't have to put this restraining order on it. Now you might say, well, shouldn't he have to? If you have a problem with him not with the form, that's a problem with the background check process. So, you know, I'm not an expert on all these details about Rob Porter and about the SF-86 form and what that requires and everything. I can take a quick look here and see. Well, no, that doesn't. Hold on real quick. Well, here's what I'll do really quick. SF-86 form. It's a questionnaire for nationals. It's a security clearance questionnaire. The SF-86 form is a security clearance questionnaire for government employment. And supposedly from what Jennifer Jacobs said, he did not have to reveal the 2010 protective order on his security clearance form. Only orders currently being enforced. And Enriqueta Toranzas writes in, the excuses coming from the White House reveal just how the abuse of women and children is excused by this administration. Staffers can't imagine Porter as an abuser, couldn't imagine Roy Moore abused children. The fruit of the leadership, real Donald Trump. Now, I will say this, Enriqueta. I think the Roy Moore and the Porter cases are a bit different because what Raj Shah said is that, and what is true is that people at the White House had worked with Rob Porter for months, and they knew him one way. Interestingly, one of Rob Porter's ex-wives, who had claimed he was abusive to her, actually said his behavior was very different in public and private. And I'll show you that quote. I was kind of surprised by that quote myself. I tweeted it out last night. Where is it here? Hang on a second. I have to go back to my tweets to before the North Korea stuff from last night. Let's see here. Where is it? It is... Here it is. This is a quote from Rob Porter's second ex-wife, and she said, I want to be very clear when I say this. I don't want to be married to him. I would not recommend anyone to date him or marry him. But I definitely want him in the White House in the position he is in. I think his integrity and ability to do his job is impeccable. And the majority of the issues he suffers are very personal and intimate. So it's certainly possible for someone to act one way in their romantic relationships and another way in public. And the White House worked with Rob Porter, and a number of people in the White House are saying, look, when we worked with him, he was a fantastic guy. So that's a bit different than Roy Moore, because I don't think people in the White House had really worked with Roy Moore and knew him personally the way they knew Rob Porter. And I certainly think, it's certainly possible that you could work with someone and then hear allegations about them and be like, whoa, that's not the person I know. I don't think that's unreasonable. But there's this question out there of, again, when did people in the White House know about the allegations? And if they knew about the allegations, even if they didn't know whether they were true or false, if they had to do it again, would they and should they have hired him for this position with those allegations out there? So maybe you have views on this. Write to me on Twitter at Lookner, at LOOKNER, if you have thoughts on this. Let's see. Righty Tighty Lefty writes in, after watching another junk White House press conference and the stupid, corrupt, or inept morons in the room, I'm starting this hashtag White House WH Press Corps corruption to put a light on them and their higher-ups. Contribute to this hashtag if you agree. MAGA. Let's see here. Rowdy Deplorable says, Rob Porter served as the chief of staff for Senator Orrin Hatch from March 2014. He also worked for Senators Rob Portman and Mike Lee. I guess he had top clearance already and other background checks to work with senators. So I don't know what security clearance he had for those senators. Raj Shah did say that he had an interim security clearance in the White House pending the completion of his background check, and he did say that interim security clearance allowed him to work with classified material. I have no idea how those clearances work and what the process is for all that stuff, so I'm just not sure. And what allegations are ones which can cause your clearance to be revoked, and what allegations are not like that. Andrew Sova says, why not cover the fact that United States men's bobsledding team consists of 7 military men? Well, maybe when that story, once the bobsledding happens in the Olympics, Andrew, and if we come on the air, maybe we'll talk about it. I appreciate you writing in about that. Hank Hill says, it seems like most of the press pool asks the same things over and over so they can each have their nightly news clips to show. During nightly news, they always say, and our so-and-so was there to ask the White House, trying to make them look like they are asking hard questions. It's a very interesting question, Hank, you raise, which is, does the fact that news channels sometimes show their people at the White House asking a question encourage reporters at the White House to ask repeat questions so they can have footage of themselves asking the question? I don't know. It's a good question. Linda Belk says, I guess they wanted the people in the White House to be mind readers. So, now this comes back to, Linda, the question of how much did the people in the White House know? When did they know it? Like, if 2 people in the White House were told something like, when Rob Porter was initially coming to the White House, something like, a couple of his 2 wives have said that there were, said things about his relationship, which might have not been cool, and we're kind of looking into relationship problems they might have had. Well, in that case, you'd be, that's a lot different than the White House, the FBI going to the White House before, right when Rob Porter is about to go there and saying, there are these detailed allegations of abuse, and here are all the allegations from the 2 different ex-wives. So what we don't know right now, and I think is an important question, is how much did people in the White House know about this, months ago, and who knew what? And I have no idea, and in general, people don't have an idea. The people involved have an idea, but that's why you were hearing some questions about that today. Matthew Abinante writes in, the reporters have an amazing ability to analyze the irrelevant while disregarding the most important issues affecting Americans in the White House. In 3 days, nobody will care about some guy named Porter. Now, something I posted, Matthew, on Twitter, which is not all too different from what you were saying, is this. I'll show you what my tweet was about this story. Hang on. This is what I tweeted out earlier. I said, this Rob Porter story is a perfect example of a story which, because it can be seen to make Trump look bad, the media will cover way out of proportion to its actual importance. And to be clear, the actions Porter is accused of are horrible. That's not what's being argued here. So my point is that when a story like this comes up that makes the Trump administration look bad, there's a tendency of the media to just give it way more coverage compared to everything else out there than it actually deserves in terms of newsworthiness. So, for example, today I've had the TV on in the background. The mainstream media I've seen, especially CNN, CNN has spent most of today covering just this one Rob Porter story. If you watch the press briefing, I would say, 80% of the questions were on the Rob Porter story? Now, that's not to say, I'm not saying perfectly reasonable story to ask about, important to get to the bottom of what happened. Certainly the accusations are incredibly serious and horrible if they're true. So none of that's being denied. My point is, there's so much else going on in the world right now that's important. The government's shutting down. The government's supposed to shut down at the end of the day. Isn't that important? There's all kinds of things in this Senate deal that I was reading about today that was reached, the Senate budget spending deal. There's possible issues with that you could ask about, and just DACA. Immigration is still not solved. It's in the Senate budget deal. It doesn't deal with DACA, so that's a question. And so there's stuff going on in Syria, and there's stuff going on. The Olympics are coming up. The North Koreans, and so we had like one question. I heard there was one North Korea question, one Syria question, one DACA question. But like, how many questions on Rob Porter? So it's just, my point is just the balance here. One stock market question, just the balance here to me seems a little off when you look at how much of that briefing and how much of the news coverage is about just Rob Porter. That's my point here. How about infrastructure? Was infrastructure asked about today? I'd like to have a question about infrastructure. That wasn't asked about today, I don't think. That's an important issue. Let's see here. Let me get to some more of your comments. George Quintero says, Enriqueta, who wrote in earlier, is wrong. George says, there is no deep pro-misogyny, pro-sexism conspiracy protecting Porter. What's protecting him is the justice system that considers everyone innocent until proven guilty. Commander Liberty says about the stock market, buy low. Lynn DeFrank says, an allegation is hearsay, not from a court, though. So no, I do not agree. I could hit and scratch myself and say you did it. Let me just make sure I'm not skipping any email here. Jason Thornton writes in, mainstream media 13 press tards used the Porter issue to avoid the major issue of the memos and the information contained in them. Here's the biggest story of the century, and all they can ask about is some alleged allegations about a White House staffer. They ask about qualifications and vetting when it appears most of them are not qualified to run a 7-Eleven or have any journalistic skills whatsoever. Please pass out the dunce caps when they depart the short bus to the White House. We really wish that reporters with journalistic skills would be allowed to replace the current batch of White House prostitutes. They are now worried about this year's budget when Obama racked up. I can't tell if I'm allowed to say that word, Jason, so I'm going to say Obama. Racked up $10 trillion in debt with barely a peep from them. Get some real reporters, for God's sake. Regards, Jason Thornton, RSBN loyalist. By the way, CNN consistently sucks. Thank you, Jason, for sending in your views on this. And another email from Terry Provo. It said, Raj needed to use questions as springboard fails and media rules presser. Please read that and about how to not rehash answers. I'm not entirely sure what you're getting at here, Terry, so I won't try to interpret your email one way or the other. But if you want to write back and clarify, I'm happy to read it. Thank you for writing. Nico Filippone writes in, the press briefings have become TMZ gossip. They don't care about actual news at all. I definitely think more could have been asked about the stock market. I mean, the stock market's gone down a few days, significantly in the last week. But some people think, the economy is doing well, and a reason the stock market is going down is because the economy is doing well and there's a risk of it overheating and it causes inflation. Also, it's just, there's definitely, that's an important story, and I think there was one question on the stock market today, and just inflation you could ask about, and the budget deal, and so just there's a lot going on, and just 80% of the briefing was about Rob Porter. Not saying it shouldn't be asked about at all, but 80% of the briefing. But it really is. It's this story. While I certainly think it's an important story that should be covered, it is this soap opera-y story that, as I've said, you've heard me say repeatedly, media companies are businesses. They're trying to make money. You got domestic abuse. It's anti-Trump. So for them, cover. even to the exclusion of lots of other stories. Let's see here. All right, so we're taking your comments on the air here. Write to me on Twitter at Lookner if you have comments about the press briefing. Maximum MAGA writes in, was very happy to hear Raj mention the importance of investigating allegations and denials. One thing I didn't point out, I forgot to point out, was that Raj Shah did say that that Rob Porter had denied these allegations. He had given denials about these allegations to the White House. Raj Shah did say that. So Maximum MAGA says, was very happy to hear Raj mention the importance of investigating allegations and denials. We have a guilty until proven innocent policy now, and I'm glad there's some common sense in this administration. I guarantee CNN and the rest of the mainstream media bash over this point. So, now, to repeat again, the government will shut down tonight unless there's a spending deal passed. The Senate reached a deal yesterday, but they haven't voted on their bill. And I've heard they haven't voted on their bill because Rand Paul is holding it up because he is not in favor of the bill. I'm guessing he thinks it spends too much. But Rand Paul, so I had heard on Fox, they were saying that Rand Paul was going to maybe hold up the Senate voting on the bill until 1 a.m. If that happened, there'd be at least an hour government shutdown. And the House has not voted on it yet. And it's not sure the House will pass the Senate bill because some Democrats in the House are mad that the Senate spending bill, doesn't do anything about DACA. And some some House Democrats are mad about that. Some House Republicans don't like the Senate agreement because they think it spends too much money and it's fiscally irresponsible. So it's not clear that the House will approve this compromise that the Senate approved of. If that doesn't happen, we have another shutdown. We'll come on the air and cover that if it's going to happen tonight. So subscribe to us on YouTube. Click the notifications bell when you subscribe to us on YouTube. And also you can follow us on Facebook, Right Side Broadcasting, and on Twitter at RSB Network. I'm on Twitter at Lookner. I post on my Twitter breaking news all the time, so you can follow me at Lookner. And Jacob Seals doing a great job producing today. Jacob Seals, who does the music for Right Side as well, you can follow him at Jacob RSBN Music. And to shout out again to our moderators in the chat rooms, Real Frank, Barbara Brayley, JC Guinevere in the YouTube chat, and Common Sense and Gleno on the website. Oh, and thanks. We had a donor before. Thank you. We are viewer supported. So if you like not having to go to the mainstream media for your news coverage and like having somebody else to watch for it, please consider donating. You can donate by going to the bottom of the YouTube chat. Click on the $sign at the bottom of the YouTube chat, or go to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate. It is your donations which keep us on the air. Ophelia says, I like your critique on media as a business, very important. Well, I just think it's important. I think a lot of people watch media and just assume, oh, they're giving me the most important news stories ranked in order of true news importance. And they forget, it's like, no, medias are businesses. They need to make money. Now, there's a question to me, I feel as a news organization, even though you need to make money, you should also feel responsibility to the country and to the citizenry. And, that news station should be a balance. You can't just lose tons of money because you can't operate, but at the same time, you can't just completely forget that people look to you and trust you, and you should feel some sense of responsibility about what you're doing. So I think it needs to be a balance, which sometimes I think is imbalanced in a way it shouldn't be. Jordan Xavier Morand writes in, I hope that President Trump does not build that wall, because I agree with Joe Kennedy 3, where he says in his rebuttal, we live in a generation of people whom, if Trump builds the wall, we will tear it down. If Trump builds the wall, I'll take a saw and hammer it. So you're saying, Jordan, you don't think he should build the wall because some people won't like it. Now, I will say this. let's say President Trump gets money to build the wall. There is this thing where, let's say he did get that money, it would take a while to build. And is it the kind of thing where, like, some of it might get built now, but then if a Democrat takes office later, it won't actually get built? So, it doesn't get built instantaneously. So that could be an issue if he does get money for this. Even if he gets money for the wall, how long does it take to build, and how much of it will actually get built? I was actually reading last night about the border wall, the current border situation in Mexico, between Mexico and the U.S. And what I had read was, maybe I can actually find it here. Was that back in like the mid '90s, I believe, in the Bush? Wait, was it midnight? Was it? I'm sorry, that wouldn't be right. Was it mid '90s or 2000s? That money had been appropriated for the wall, and they started building a wall, but eventually it stopped. Yeah, here it is. Sorry, not '90s. It was 2006. Here we go. Secure Fence Act of 2006. The Senate confirmed it. George Bush signed it. George W. Bush signed it in 2006. The signing of the bill. There was a fence project. Here it is. So it was an act that called for fencing on the border, but not all of the fencing it called for ended up getting built. I was reading about this last night, but where is it? It doesn't give a quick summary here of what exactly the bill called for. But anyways, it was just interesting to read about this previous bill that had been passed that had called for fencing, and some of it got put up, but then not all of it got put up that was supposed to be put up because the cost ended up getting too high, and then it wasn't approved later on, spending the money on it. So, but I need to catch up on that. But it was interesting to see. I just wasn't aware of that. So, let's see. Yeah, so like if you look here, erection of the fence by April 2009, DHS had erected about 613 miles of a new pedestrian fencing and barriers. Jim DeMint introduced in 2010 legislation seeking to require completion of the 700-mile-long double-layered fence. DeMint's legislation was defeated in a vote in the Senate in 2010. Anyways. Cost, although the 2006 law authorized construction of a fence, Congress initially did not appropriate funds for it. I got to read more about that, but you can look that up, the Secure Fence Act of 2006. But something it pointed out was, the message from Jordan made me think of it, is this idea that even if a president gets funding to do something, that doesn't mean it just happens, especially if it's something like a wall that can take a while, because maybe something happens in the future where a different administration comes in and it doesn't get carried out. I mean, we've seen that with President Obama. President Obama, he put in the DACA policy, but a president came in who didn't like that policy and said, I'm not going to keep enforcing that policy. So, anyways, just a thought. Linda Frank says, what about the new revelations from text messages about Obama's involvement with FBI investigation on Clinton? Do you think, maybe it's, Lynn, are you saying that should have been asked about in the press briefing, perhaps? JC, one of our moderators, says, Steve, screwdreamers build that wall and build the Canadian wall too. So JC is a fan of the wall. Sightless Seer says, what are your thoughts on pre-submissions of questions digitally sent to the podium and read and answered by those who hold the press conference to ensure relevant questions are asked or the most questions are answered all at once to ensure a more effective and efficient meeting takes place? Well, the problem with that would be, Sightless Seer, is that some people would complain that the White House wasn't being transparent because they're not willing to answer just any question that's asked. So I think it would be very politically hard for a White House to say, we're only going to have briefings where we get the questions beforehand and choose which ones to answer. Zadok Melchizedek says, why not use money for the deficit first, then the wall? Well, I'm guessing some people in Congress agree with you, Zadok. The deficit is an important thing, and I've heard some criticism about this latest budget deal that the Senate reached, and that presumably the House will sign something like that, and the president is in support of it. But there are people out there who say, look, government just doesn't want to deal with the debt going up and the deficit, and they're going to refuse to deal with it until it's too late. It's a hard thing to cut spending and deal with the deficit because that's not very politically popular, and it's always more popular politically to spend money. And I don't want to say 100% always, but most of the time it's more popular politically. And so there's this tendency to just keep spending money, really, no matter what party's in power. Donna Maria sent me a tweet from Judicial Watch saying it filed a Freedom of Information Act against the Justice Department for FBI documents on Director Comey's book. You can find that tweet at Judicial Watch. Enriqueta Turanzas writes in, Steve, abusers don't tell the world they abuse. Take a look at what excuses did to over 150 young women here in Michigan by Dr. Nassar. All the sexual abuse covered up by disbelief. Now, I don't know with the Nassar case, it's a good question as to, you're saying covered up by disbelief. There's accusations that people like coaches and Olympic officials and school officials had heard the allegations about Nassar way before he ended up being arrested and way before, anything was done about it. But there's a question is, did they not... Can you really say that everybody didn't believe them? Is it possible that some people just didn't want to deal with it and think about it because it would have been bad for the school or bad for the Olympics? So, certainly maybe some people didn't believe these accusations. I certainly think that's possible. But I don't think that's necessarily the only... It's certainly not the only possible reason why people wouldn't take action. There might have been some people who heard the allegations earlier and thought, well, maybe they are true. They didn't disbelieve them, but they thought, this would be so bad for us, I don't even want to look into it. Let's just not deal with it. So I don't know what happened. I'm just raising that as a possibility. Deborah Herzog writes in, if we stop giving our money to other countries, we can build a wall to protect ourselves. No wall, no America. Jason Thornton writes in, Steve, we had such a blast adding our own subtitles to that North Korean state-run movie you ran last night. We should have it on a weekly basis. We would love you to host it for us. Please run that by Joe. Our chat room comments are way funnier than any SNL skits, except for the ones you wrote. Call it RSNL, Right Side Night Live. Thanks, Steve and RSBN. Jason, your suggestion has been duly noted. We will discuss it. Miss Rob Mob writes in my opinion, the press should be focused on the corruption at the highest level of Obama's administration and in Obama's FBI and State Department. All right, I think we've gotten to all your comments, so I'm going to wrap up the stream in a minute here. If there is a shutdown tonight, of course, we will cover it for you. And subscribe to us on YouTube. Click the notifications bell when you subscribe to us, so you get notified when we're coming on the air. And if there's other big news today, we will come on and cover it. And follow us on Facebook, Right Side Broadcasting, on Twitter, at RSB Network. I will be posting on Twitter breaking news throughout the day as I normally do. At Lookner on Twitter is where to find me. Jacob Seals, fantastic job producing. At Jacob RSBN Music is where to find him. Thank you so much for writing in all of your comments and letting me read them during the post show. Thank you to our moderators, JC, Barbara Braley, Guinevere, Real Frank in the chat room, and Common Sense and Gleno on the website. And thank you to those who donated. That's what keeps us on the air. We cannot do this without your support. So we appreciate your donations. You can donate at the bottom of the YouTube chat. Click on the $ sign at the bottom of the YouTube chat. or go to rsbn.tv/donate. You can even get free Right Side stuff like this Right Side mug by setting up a monthly donation at rsbn.tv/donate. All right, we're going to wrap up this coverage of the press briefing for today. Thank you so much for joining us for today's post show. And we're going to wrap this up. So for now, for Jake Seals, for myself, Steve Lookner, thanks for choosing Right Side. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. And I'm sure we'll see you soon with more news. Maybe tonight, maybe this afternoon, who knows. But we'll be back soon with more news, and we look forward to seeing you then. So for now, have a great day, everybody. We'll see you soon here at Right Side Broadcasting.